We are now 8 hours into stunning breaking news out of Baltimore. Around 1:30 this morning, a container ship struck a pier of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. Within seconds, the sections of the bridge around that pier collapsed into the harbor.
It's just unbelievable. Ever since then, first responders have been trying to save people who went into the water, and they expect that search and rescue operation to last for several more hours. The people they're looking for include crews working on the bridge.
This is an active search and rescue mission. We know there were individuals on the bridge at the time of the collapse working on the bridge, contractors for us.
That is Maryland Transportation Secretary Paul Wiedefeld speaking there, confirming state workers were on that bridge when the ship hit it, and that's in addition to the vehicles on the bridge at that moment. And joining us right now on the phone is Captain John Konrad. He is a retired merchant marine and runs the website Capt. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
Oh, we wish it was a better day, but we got to ask, when you look at that video of the ship, what do you see?
Well, you see as the ship is coming towards the bridge, it's going relatively fast. It's going about 8 knots, and you see large amounts of smoke coming out of the smokestack. So question is, the engine seems to be working hard. We don't know exactly why it was working hard. Potentially the ship was put in reverse to try to slow it and get a new course. But the engine was working hard, and then we saw a blackout. All the lights on the ship went out, and it looks like the emergency generator kicked in. The lights reemerged, but the emergency generator cannot slow the ship down. All it can do is restore the emergency fire pumps and lighting. So that, the ship continued to lose course, and the bow was pushed by the wind down into that column, and unfortunately it hit. We also saw there were no tugboats around. Usually the Port of Baltimore allows the ships to get rid of the tugs before it gets near the bridge, but the ship likely did have a pilot still on board.
Oh. So it sounds like there were a few steps taken before the generator kicked in. At what point do you make that distress call, and what can cause a ship to lose power?
Well, the most common cause of losing power is a crash astern. So if you did an emergency astern, I don't know that is what happens here, but when a ship comes into port, so when it's coming in from overseas, before it enters the port, it has to do a crash astern test. They make them do that because it is a frequent cause of blackout. So they want to make sure that the ship does not black out when it goes full astern. It's also an older ship. These are minimally crewed ships. The ship likely has less than 25 people on board, and they're highly complicated. So any mechanical issue, electrical issue in the ship's engine room could cause a blackout.
And speaking off camera, you mentioned a bow thruster. What is that, and how could it play a role in an incident like this?
Right. So on the bow of the ship, you'll see if you look at pictures, a circle with an X through it. That's a symbol, meaning there's a bow thruster underneath, and the tugs don't want to press against that area. So there's a little propeller that goes sideways, and that propeller just moves the bow left and right. It's a small, much smaller engine than the main propeller, which is on the stern, and that can help. If the wind pushes the bow off course, as it looks like happened now, that can push the bow back, under the bridge. Problem is, those bow thrusters are recessed. So as the ship picks up speed, the bow thruster becomes less effective. Usually when a ship is going more than 5 knots, that bow thruster does not work properly. So that could be another reason that they, did went full astern to slow down to restore that bow thruster, but we don't know that for sure. It's just an educated guess at this point.
And I have to ask you, what role do tugboats play in all of this?
Right, so a tugboat is the best thing to have when you lose engine, and they're required for close-in maneuvering. So as the ship gets, when it's coming in from overseas and it gets under the bridge and comes close to port, you have to have a pilot on board, and that pilot orders tugs based on the maneuverability and of the ship. And those tugs can push the ship sideways, it can push the heading, and it can also slow down the ship if it's going too fast. But Baltimore and the U.S. Coast Guard captain of the port, so the Coast Guard captain of the port is in charge of all the port facilities and that. The military person in charge of the entire area. They do not require a tugboat under the bridge. If there was a tugboat there, a tugboat off the stern, usually F2, that could have slowed the ship down, and a tugboat connected near the bow could have pulled that heading away from the column. But tugboats are not required at this bridge point.
Captain Konrad, people are going to be listening to your educated opinion on all of this and what happened here. And the obvious question's got to be, why wasn't the bridge shut down if this vessel was in distress?
It was, things are happening really quickly. It seems like it was slow, but this all happened in under 5 minutes. And, these ships are very minimally manned. You have an all-foreign crew. They're required to speak English, but how well they speak English is not always known. And you have one local pilot. So you have a captain like me who's an expert in the port of Baltimore, and he's managing everything. He's trying to talk to the engine room, trying to get tugboats, trying to call Mayday with the Coast Guard. And it's a lot for a very minimally manned ship. And these ships don't have very much automation. So there's been resistance towards using AI to help the pilot and help the ship navigate. It's really operated on old school VHF radio. So unless that bridge is manned and it's not a drawbridge, and someone on the bridge is monitoring that radio and then can quickly put up the signs, in under 5 minutes, it's just not going to happen. If it had been a drawbridge, it's possible they might have got it shut down, but things were just happening too fast to shut down the bridge in this case.
That is Captain John Konrad. Captain Konrad, thank you so much for joining us for a few minutes here and sharing your insight and knowledge with us.